Welcome to the BaseCamp Community Podcast, hosted by your head coaches, Tim Cusick and me, Namrita Brooke. We discuss timely topics that you can apply to get the most out of your training and learn to perform at your best. I am Namrita Brooke, BaseCamp coach and sports nutritionist. I've been coaching for over 18 years. I have a PhD in applied exercise physiology, a master's in sports nutrition, and I'm also a registered dietitian.
And my name is Tim Cusick. I'm the other head coach here at BaseCamp. I've been coaching for over 20 years. I've had the luxury of working with numerous national world championships and guiding athletes to the Olympics.
Welcome back. Yeah.
I know it's like I love the flow of our summer podcast. It's like every Friday morning or every other Friday morning with Namrita, and we get to chat about cool topics. It's awesome.
Yeah, and this one is a little bit timely because we're getting ready to go to a big gravel race called Lauf Gravel Worlds in Lincoln, Nebraska. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to suggest approaching a race like that. So not specifically for this course, but more the idea of gravel racing in general. And today we're mostly talking about the idea of pacing and how that can be a little bit challenging. I think when athletes are getting ready to do an event, it all comes down to their individual goals, right? And then we think about the specifics of the course, who else is going to be there, and then we have the series of goals. But how you get through a race like that, whether it's 75 miles or 150 miles or 200 or whatever, there's a lot of consideration that needs to go into how you're going to pace that. So we're going to talk about the effects of other racers and tactics and the course and the course profile and when we get through today. So lots of interesting conversation points on tap. Um, yeah, why don't you get started and talk about maybe the kind of two ways you see athletes thinking about pacing when they go into a race like this?
Yeah, and it's such a great place to start. So we'll still stick on this overview. This concept we're going to talk about pacing works across the board, all races, period. Actually, I'm going to kind of fit, but we're going to focus on gravel races today. But this concept will work on any race. We're going to use Laugh Gravel Worlds because we're going. I know our community's going. A lot of our listeners are going. I think we're going to have 60 or 70 people out there. We have like 8 or 9 coaches. So it's going to be a great event for us. That being said, it actually tactically, it's a great course to discuss application of what we're going to teach. So let's start out with this concept of pacing. We get this question all the time and all the time. I think athletes going into an event, whether they're a coached athlete, how do I pace this event? Like, what's my strategy for delivering power? Which, well, if you think about what pacing is, that's exactly what you're talking about. Um, let's pull back and talk about that a little bit. Like, one, it's a challenge to always answer that question. It really is, because a coach can give you a good physical response based on your fitness, your training, and your abilities. But understand there's other variables, your mindset, approach, how much race anxiety you have, and things like that. So we're going to kind of give a big picture of a technique, but that doesn't make this absolute. Like, my fear is every listener is going to go to their coach and say, I need some absolute plan, because the absolute plan, as you're going to hear through this podcast, also isn't perfect. So let's start with theory. When we look at the pacing of a concept, pacing ranges. You have to think about it on a continuum. And imagine on the left hand side, we have what I call stable pacing. And on the right hand side, you have what I call dynamic pacing. So what's stable pacing? If we're discussing pacing for a time trial, we're going to go out and do a 40-kilometer time trial. We tend to suggest a very stable pacing for each segment, each 15 minutes, each minute, whatever, however, granularity you want. It's a very stable pacing, and it is easy to predict to a degree because it's linked to your FTP, which is the key demand of that delivery system. And there's some variables like us, there's some climbing and descending and whatever, but it's basically linked to your FTP. The strategy, simply put, for your pacing is a pretty tight range. Climb up hills a little harder, go down hills a little easier. Maybe that's another podcast. And that's your stable pacing strategy. And it fits well in a neat little piece of paper, and you can follow it. As you move to the more dynamic sides of these different sports we have in cycling, let's just focus this on drop bar sports. On the other extreme, we have criteriums or short road races they are very dynamic pacing because you are in reality racing the other racers. Yes, having some pace guidance might help, but you need to dynamically track what's going on in the race. Your goal isn't to just put out a good time, it's to stand on the podium, beat the other racers, do well. So that is the dynamic extreme. That's a very wide range of pacing and a lot of variables going into that. Now, when you look at those two extremes, people could probably wrap their heads around that. The question becomes, where does gravel fit? And interestingly enough, and we'll talk about why, gravel sort of fits in the middle. There is actually some predictable stabilized, and the range is wider, so I'm a little hesitant to say stabilized, but there are some predictable pacing patterns we can do based on the event's length. But there's also a dynamic element that needs to be in play, but it's not the same as in road. The stabilization side of it is not the same as it's this hybrid. And as we get into this, I'm going to tell you why it's a challenge, and this is a good discussion to have. You would think, oh, hybrid, that's awesome. I get the best of both, stable and dynamic. You actually
Mhm.
get the worst of both. And you need to understand the pacing strategy and how to execute it so you don't fall victim to that reality, that you turn that worst of both into a positive performance event versus being victimized by a bad pacing or bad decision making strategy.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, you have to think, I mean, other than the duration, so the distance of the course that you're racing, we're also contending with a much different surface, different tires, different surface, changing surface. So how does that impact what we're talking about here?
It's huge, right? So we think about when I do my stable to dynamic and give you this idea of a continuum, we need to understand the other thing that changes that's actually at the highest peak. Time trialing has low variables.
Hmm.
Like you'll know the course, it tends to be the same surface range, right? We have a limited amount of climbing typically in time trials. There'll be wind going out, headwind coming back. Like we have a much better understanding of the variables. In road racing, you have maybe slightly more variables because there's a dynamic event happening, but not really. Like, you know, the course, the surfaces tend to be smooth, and you're all going through those variables at the same time. If you're in the peloton and stuff like that. So the impact on you is exactly as the same as the five riders riding right around you in the peloton. So that's actually less impacted. Those are less impacted by the variables. Part of why gravel is in the middle and why it could be the worst of both worlds is you have to take on all the variables. You have surface, you have terrain, you have wind, and particularly for longer gravel events tend to be longer. You face it in a lot of different ways. You have other variables that are even more complex for those type of events, like fueling, performance, decision making. Like
Hmm.
there's a lot going on there. So don't, even though I put it on a spectrum of stable to dynamic, the highest impacted area by those variables is gravel. That variable is peaked in the middle of that continuum.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, skills, and we can think about skills and performance skills as a wide range when it comes to gravel. It's not just about handling skills anymore. And with the, I mean, you're doing the 150, I think. That's a long race, and we both did it last year. So you can be strong and you can be savvy in a group, and burn matches when you need them early on, but you have to think about the middle and the end of that race too. So what are things going to look like 4 to 5 hours in? What if you are alone for a while? And what if you made too many costly decisions after the first 60 minutes? I mean, there's so many things that it's a constant, just ongoing series of decisions that you have to, be making. And if you're not prepared for that, I guess, if you're not thinking about what all those decision points might be heading into it, and or you skip something costly like hydration or fueling or whatever, like that's going to impact your decision making too. So it's that durability that we're always talking about that is another, I think, key performance element of gravel. So it's not just about, can you make the right decisions at the start of the race, at the front of the race? they're ongoing. And
Yeah.
we think about durability and it's like, oh, we have good fatigue resistance. But again, think about in gravel all the little things that go into you being able to express durability in an event like that. So
Yeah,
let's,
and you said something. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you
yeah.
said something so good there, and then we can get into the segments. Is um, when you're time trialing, right, you're executing a pacing plan. And if you, the better you execute that, the better you're going to perform. When you're doing a crit or a shorter road race or even a longer road race, you are racing the field. The better you execute that, the better you're going to do. In gravel, you have way more decisions to make because you are both racing the field and executing a pacing plan because of the length and the higher demand of surfaces and stuff like that. You actually have to manage both. And if early in this podcast you want to take an aha moment, that's like what you feel if you're out there doing gravel races and stuff like that. That's what you're feeling because you're making a series of tactical decisions racing the field, and you're making a series of decisions of staying on pace. When should I break that? When is there a tactical opportunity worthwhile breaking my, so you have more decisions. And that's why I remembered, I thought your point was great. So much of the challenge of gravel pacing comes to the decision making process, not just the physicality. And that's complex that we need to make simpler so that you can
Mm.
execute better.
Well, it's a good job for you. So let's talk about how to make this complicated idea a little more simpler and, maybe hopefully come up with some takeaways. So let's think about, yeah, you're faced with two main goals, racing the other racers and also not blowing up and having some sort of plan to get you to the finish line as quickly as possible, knowing that there's all these other racers there. So how do we start?
Let's start by breaking down this concept of pacing on gravel. And here's where using Lauf Gravel Worlds is such a great example because it's not a climbing course, but there's plenty of climbing because it's rolling climbing. It's a highly dynamic course. Uh, Navigation is not a challenge. There's not a lot of turns. Most of those turns are 90-degree right hand or left hand turns. So that's all easy. So you can get a fair amount of focus on pacing. So let's start with that concept. Pacing on gravel is not necessarily the same as pacing on time trial or road. Two big changes, like when we think about this, that you have to consider more deeply for gravel events. One, the length of the pacing execution. So yeah, like I still think I'm going to do the 150. I have a couple of athletes doing the 150. The pacing execution is somewhere from 8 hours and 45 minutes to 10 hours plus. That is a challenge in its own part. So that's just entry into the pacing game, right? Now I have to think the course has about 10,000 feet of climbing, all coming in the rolling seas of Nebraska, short punchy up, short punchy down, and they come one after another. So now I have to pace in a dynamic terrain environment.
Mhm.
Now, again, okay, cool. It's also Nebraska. You may or may not know this if you're a listener. There's not a lot of trees. So you tend to have more wind out there. So you need to think about wind, where that is going to hit impact and stuff like that. So your pacing strategy has to take into consideration this concept of these other variables and all built into the system. So for somebody doing the 150, for example, you're talking about 150 miles, 10,000 feet of gain, um, high likelihood of winds, high rolling climbing demand, like on off. And you add the last variable to that, you'll probably be performing in a higher heat load. Your pacing strategy has to take all that into effect. That is so important in the game. Now, the wrinkle that kind of changes in pacing, and I think this is confusing, and I would put this in between pacing and racing the other racers as a wrinkle. If you're on the road and you're sitting in a pace line, you're in a small peloton, you're in a break of 10 or whatever that might be, 10 other riders, you're typically, when you're setting in, you're getting 30 to 40% power savings in relationship to the speed you're outputting. And that's because the road surface is smooth. You can line up nice and neat. and the speeds tend to be higher. The group speed itself is elevating higher, actually giving you a better rest. The people in front of you are punching a bigger hole in the air, allowing you to have less resistance. And that's reasonably predictable, I guess. Like you can kind of count on that in racing. People generally, if they're racing, they're in a pace line and doing pretty well. We mentally want to translate that to gravel as being the same. It's not. Like, and I think this is something else people have to grasp. Yes, we want to find others to ride with, but that has that gain you're getting for doing a gravel pace line goes significantly down for three real reasons. One, in general, and don't get me wrong, the pointy tip of the gravel, the pros that are really driving gravel speeds high, they're moving pretty fast. But let's just talk about like us regular folks. The speeds are lower, therefore your power savings is less. You're probably going from 30 to 40% just from the speeds themselves down to 25 to 30%, maybe 20 to 30%. And I'm sort of just giving you examples. I know the scientists are going to correct me, but you definitely take a significant step down in those aerodynamic savings. Then you have to take into effect the rolling resistance plays in there. You don't totally separate that out. The higher rolling resistance is moving the power to speed ratio up. Therefore, your savings are even less. So sitting in a gravel pace line, you're probably maybe at best going to get 20, 25%. I'm just estimating. I haven't done the math. Now, couple the final point, it's harder to ride a tight pace line in gravel because you have to be unbelievably trusting of the person in front of you. And it's hard to get comfortable. We tend to have slightly bigger gaps in gravel. We tend to be offset a little bit more, not necessarily on the correct wind side. Execution is more challenging. So we're losing another 5% in execution. So the gain in sitting in a group, which I'm not saying everybody's going to say, well, Tim said don't ride with the group. Not at all. The gain is there, but it's not nearly as much on the road. So this has an impact that actually takes away some of the dynamic race the other side racers. And it makes you think about your pacing strategy within that because you can't just sit in and recover.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't happen as frequently. So you've got to wrap your brain around those elements of pacing. You have more variables, wind, heat, surface, and climbing would be true throughout, but in this particular case of Lauf Gravel World's a unique terrain variable. Less gain for sitting in the peloton, therefore, or sitting in a group, you're still outputting more energy, and then you still need to be able to deliver the pace that you're doing for a much longer time over longer courses.
Mm. Yeah, and even, with these kinds of rollers, and I kind of have that where I live too. I mean, the downhills are not necessarily a brake, or you can use them as a brake, or you can actually push way too hard on them too. So I think that's part of the unique terrain as well. On a true climbing course, you can build in the descents as some sort of recovery and plan on that. But this is another factor that you have to decide, whether you're alone or whether you're with other people. You can absolutely go too hard on some sections and the gain wouldn't be worth it. So I think it's hard to give solid rules because it really just depends on the course, the wind, your technical skills, who you're riding with, et cetera, what your relative strengths and limiters are. So if we try to give some parameters here, what would you say? I guess we start with pacing. So early versus late, let's say. What are we thinking about in terms of power? Are we using power? Are we using RPE, heart rate? What do you guide athletes with to give them some like guardrails, I guess?
Yeah, so let's talk. So the concept here of overall approach. So you have to take the concept in gravel where it's longer of let's call it, a steady state power pacing.
Hmm.
So and we'll dig into this, you need to break the course down into segments, not necessarily distances, because gravel tends to be like, wow, something's going on in that first 20 miles that's different than is going on in that next 20 miles. So you just have to think segment. But an overall strategy is you need on the left hand side a steady state power target range. It really needs to be a range. It's super important that you're talking ranges. And that steady state power range should be driven by what the pacing strategy will be in the final 25% of the race. Like say 30, say 20, that's fine. So often we want to start our power pacing on what we think we can sustain, what will give us a better grounding, and still could be as wrong, by the way, but what would give us a better grounding is if we think and plan around what are we going to be able to sustain in the last 25% of the way. To me, that's what sets the range, not the first 25%. You might change the range for that, but the overarching range is what do I think I can sustain? Where will I be in that end race? And that's if you're a self-coached athlete or your coach, you need to consider the athlete's durability. Where are they at in that? So understanding some of their durability and capability there drives that pacing strategy. That establishes range. Step two is you make exceptions then to that range. So in a gravel race, typically maybe having a higher range for the first half an hour to hour because they tend to start hard. That's a pretty good idea. Like there might be a unique, like a couple of long climbs in your event, your gravel event. So you're making like the Crusher like has that event. You should have a different range for the long climbs and dealing with that. But you're still working off your core range. You're just tweaking it for those segments. But then number three, and everybody's probably listening to that and say, okay, that makes good, simple sense. And it should be a range because I could be in a group and saving my 10% or not in a group. Um, things can happen. But then what you need that's unique in gravel, my opinion, is you need to understand that there are certain tactical decisions you'll have to make, in my opinion, more in a gravel race than any other event where you need a ceiling. So the ceiling target really needs to be what am I ultimately willing to invest in a short tactical execution to accomplish something I want? Catch a group, jump up to a faster group, um, get to an aid station in front of everybody. There's lots of reasons you might want to do that. So you should have range, adjusted range, and a tactical ceiling for investing in improving your position, performance, time, goal, whatever you're riding for. And it's that last one that you need to take time thinking out because you don't want to be making those decisions mid-race because you're using power and you're using your RPE, your feelings, and I feel great right now. I should make that decision. I don't feel great right now. I shouldn't. The reality is of a longer gravel race, and I have to credit Rebecca Rush for quoting this, everything changes. You'll have moments you feel great, and that might lead you to make a mistake. And you'll have moments you feel bad, and that might lead you to miss an opportunity. By having that third element, that ceiling, that tactical thing planned out, you will not have to make complex decision when you're fatigued and tired and everything else. And that's why I'm saying the gravel execution of your gravel pacing strategy, even though it's not quite as dynamic on the road, is more decision dynamic. You have to put guardrails on. Here's my pacing strategy, and that's determined to finish okay. I need to think about the way I'm doing the final third. I tweak that pacing strategy for certain segments, a little harder start, a big climb. But then I have a series, a ceiling, and a tactical list of things that might make me spend up to that ceiling to achieve something. If you're spending up to that ceiling and achieving nothing, you've wasted that effort. That to me is the best gravel planning.
Mhm. Yeah, I love Rebecca's quote too because it takes a lot of pressure off, I think. There we want to be so sometimes so rigid and so controlling of these plans, but it's so good to remember whatever moment you're in that everything does change. So pre-thinking this and having that flexibility built in is a major, factor in success on race day, I think, and how flexible you're able to be. Um, what was the other point? Oh yeah. And again, this is why when we train, um, doing these race simulation dynamic workouts is so important. We build those into training because if you're just always doing, 20-minute steady state intervals or 5-minute steady state intervals, that's not reflective of, as you can see now, what's going to happen on race day. And so trust in that training. And I always, when we're doing intervals and we're doing these practice races, group rides, whatever, proving to yourself that you can do something or seeing how you react to pushing the envelope then, or maybe intentionally trying, to find that limit for yourself. That helps you to make those pre-decisions for race day. Now, if you haven't done a lot of that like me this year, then you just have to kind of go with it and have your plan and be flexible, but also relying on your experience too. Like, after several years of training and racing and doing different events at varying levels of preparation, you kind of know your body. So not to overthink and be so overstructured in this pacing plan. I think the way you laid it out is really helpful. So it gives some parameters, but also reminds the athlete that um their ceilings, and everything has a time distance component, right? So it's not like,
Mhm.
oh, here's my power number. It's that power number for how long can you hold it? How long can you
Mhm.
hold something for 12 minutes is very different than how long can you hold it repeatedly for 30 to 45 seconds at a time. Um,
Agreed. So what you said and what I said, it's funny. Like when we talk about gravel, then you and listeners, you may be doing this right now. Okay, just boil this down to the
Mhm.
pacing number. Like tell me the range, right? I wouldn't start there.
Mhm.
You need to understand the decisions first. That's going to be part of. So you have to think about this. You're in a gravel race, you're tired, your brain is working. This is why, and Namrita makes a great point, doing dynamic work, because you're actually preparing yourself to execute decisions, right? And you're knowing what you can and cannot do. You're practicing the decision in dynamic race simulation kind of workouts. Um, because you have to make that decisions when you're also a little bit tired. You're executing the pacing, fatigue is building, and you need to make good decisions. I guarantee you this will resonate with every listener. Think about every gravel race you've ever done that you didn't succeed in, like you only were able to learn. You never fail. You either succeed or learn, but you were learn. It always comes down to, well, if at that one moment I would have done this, or if I hadn't done that, like you tend to do something wrong. It's not accumulation of the things that you've done right. And that could have been in your prep and training, it could have been in your fueling, it could have been in a lot of things. But you tend to, that's we make that big mistake, but yet we don't build that decision making process into our plan. And we're trying to make those very, very important decisions without a ceiling. What my point was is building into your pacing plan and without any thought of like, what if? So, Namrita, like, let's talk about this decision making, the mental side of that pacing strategy. Like, what are two or three key things that you have to have in your decision guide, let's call it, as part of your pacing? What might you add?
yeah, well, um, I mean, for me, like I just think of, if you've done the work heading into the race, like you have an idea, go back and look through your data. You have an idea of what your capability is and how well you're able to recover. How many times can you put out this sort of effort? Um, if you're kind of feeling like you're on your limit in a race and um, you're unsure, I mean, I think the more that you train and the more you prep going into it, the more easily you can make those decisions. But your body has to be in a state where it can make the decisions, right? So, I mean, I typically always go back to the state of fueling and how well set up are you, because it not only affects your energy stores, but it affects your brain and its ability to think clearly under pressure when you're fatigued and make coherent decisions. So I think early on, so things are a little bit more chaotic. Race nerves are high. Um, Fast people are always going to be fast at the start of the race, even people who are not going to be fast later in the race are going to be fast earlier in the race. So chances are it's going to be, there's a lot of action in that first 30 to 60 minutes. And if you haven't trained that way, or even if you have not started with enough energy there, that can really impact your decision making then, and also how you recover from that early effort and any decisions you make from then on. So
I
yeah,
good. I mean, that's such a great start. Like it is a pre-decision process also, and having those things in place. It's super important. I think people underestimate that to a degree.
yeah, and so that planning part is you're doing part of it now. When you're listening to the podcast, you're making your notes and you're thinking about the segments of the race and how they may play out, given an honest assessment of your fitness right now and, how you've done with your training. What are your goals for the race? Who else is going to be there? How do have you raced against them before? And how are they going to approach the race? You might already have an idea of those things, but also again, like planning, I'm going to start the race not slightly dehydrated. I'm not going to go too hard on Thursday and Friday in those rides. I'm not going to let my pre-race nerves or anxiety or change in situation affect my fueling plan heading into it. So I can have enough glycogen stores to start this race.
Mhm.
So go ahead. Yeah.
No, sorry. It's like I think that's so important because that sets you up to make good pacing
Mhm.
decisions in
Yeah.
the race. So for me, when I look at the in the race pacing, here's an overarching thought for everybody, right? For gravel pacing, it's not really holding a power target or range. It's repeatedly making the right decision. And listen to what I'm saying, repeatedly making the right decision before the race makes the decision for you.
Mhm.
Like when you do things wrong in gravel pacing, the race makes the decision for you. It takes over. The race itself dictates the result. You lose control of dictating the results. Well set up, as Namrita just laid out, in the race, you can break your decisions into two categories. When you're racing the other racers, what decision? I'm sitting in a pace line. Should I or shouldn't I? All those decisions we make. And when you're racing your pacing plan, like that's two key areas. Those are two different types of decisions you tend to make. And there's actually a third that I'm going to give you. But let's work on one and two, and then it'll help third. One, I'm racing the other racers. What type of decisions do I make? Do I stay in? Is this a little too hard for me? Do I remember to eat? All the things. Are they going too slow for me? Remember, the power savings is not as high. It might be worth riding off the front and moving that group and moving up. You have to make a series of race the other racers decisions. You should pre-plan those out. If I'm feeling bad, if I'm feeling good, what are numbers and metrics I can use to support that? What I often do in events for segments or with other groups, I will sit in that group and do a slightly higher power number for 15 minutes. If it doesn't settle in, and I think it's gonna, and I'm hitting that higher, let's say it's 80% of FTPs, and I was planning a long race. So I meant to be planned at more like 65. I don't know, pick a number. I'm only going to try that for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, if it's still that high, I am going to tap out and move back. If I'm 5% under my pacing target in that group and it's 5% or more, maybe I do move forward. So pre-think those decisions, put some criteria to the decision so you're not just working on just feelings, even though that should be part of the criteria. You have some things thought out. I absolutely tell you in gravel world, so giving it back to this real world example, because it happened to me last year having raced it. Um, you have these like 10-mile straights and you see the gravel sea, so you can see rises ahead of you as far as like a mile. It seems like 10 when you see them, but you are like, wow, if I'm going 5% under my target or maybe 10% under my target in this group and I see a group, part of the decision making that I might make is, should I try to move forward here? But I'm going to get to that.
Mhm.
Let's say you're alone, or this actually can happen in groups too. It's part of it. You need to make a decision. So you're racing with others, you're making dynamic decisions. Like the situation's unfolding, you're reading the situation, and you are making a dynamic decision. Now, what about when you're alone? when you're alone, you're making what I call the disciplined decision. You have to have discipline. And this is where we get in trouble in racing all the time. I went out way too hard. I knew better, but I still did it, right? We are junkyard dogs. We chase the car down the road. We can't help it. But that's what you're really doing in that scenario. You are making disciplined decisions. And it comes down to one question going on in your brain, because you tend to know you're doing it wrong. You're outside the range. You're going to, should I or shouldn't I? Should I or shouldn't I? It's like you have the devil and the angel on each shoulder, right? Yes, go harder. No, don't go harder. You have to make that decision on discipline. And discipline is hard. You're in an 8-10 hour race. But I feel good this first hour. I can give a little more, and then you pay for it in the end. That's why you target your pacing strategy on how you're going to finish, not how you start. So those are the two. You have that racing the other racers, dynamic decision. You have racing amongst yourself, the discipline decision. The third decision is a little more complex. Remember, I said you have to have a ceiling for investing in tactical opportunities. You always have this decision of the override decision. What makes you override your pacing strategy? It has to have a tactical advantage. It has to advance you or increase the odds of you accomplishing what you want to accomplish, or do not invest in it. Now, that's easy for me to say, and you might say, no shit, Tim, but how? Predetermine what that means. It's different on every course. It's different in every race. That's you, the racer, or working with your coach, making determinations what's worth investing in. It might be course specific. Hey, in that long climb, which we don't have in Love Gravel Worlds, but in that long climb, let's throw all in there. That's a place, if you're feeling it, it's right, and the tactical, the event's unfolding, go for it there. It might be in Love Gravel Worlds, you're going to have headwind the whole way home. Maybe you hold back till that point, take advantage of the sail and the tailwind when it's actually harder to race the other racers. Again, another day topic. And then be more tactical in gravel in the headwind where people are more fatigued and you might actually get a better result. So that, is the type of thing. You're pre-planning out those override decisions. But, and here's the final important part of the decision making of your pacing, the thing you should do first. That override decision should never break your ceiling. Like, you always go over and under for a couple of seconds, don't get me wrong, but it should never break your ceiling, because that makes every decision bad. Like, write that down. Like, that's why those three areas of decision, that is your pacing strategy. Everything else is happening with a reasonably broad range of what you're setting out to pace. It's good decisions, those three areas of decisions. So you have, right, a dynamic decision. Do I sit in? Do I not? How am I racing the other racers? You have a disciplined decision, like I need to race my plan and make decisions to stay disciplined. And then finally, you have your override. That's your investment decision. You only have a couple of investments to make those investments wisely, and know your investment has a ceiling. You make good decisions through that three, and your pacing strategy will be superior.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's such good advice. So one thing that's also unique to gravel, and we'll talk a little bit about it when we talk about fueling, but let's talk about aid stations and strategy there. So, we think about equipment and how that affects our comfort, aerodynamics, its weight, and you have to think about where you're going to stop, how much can you carry, because if you're going to get behind, again, all decisions are going to be bad. So, in a race like Gravel World, it's completely you're on your own. So they do have the aid stations, but you can't have a crew there doing the, pit stop refuel for you. So you have to take care of yourself, basically. So there's some time investment there. There's, potentially whoever you're with, they're going to make a different decision of where to stop. So how are you thinking about that as part of your pre-planning? And if you have like some things that like you have enough bottles to get you to mile, whatever, 52, and you're in this great group and you know that you have to stop then, and it's not looking like the other people you're with are going to stop, like that could be a major decision point for you in that decision tree. So how do you handle something like that?
Wow, what a great question. So, three rules for me in the aid station, right? reduce the amount of stops.
Mm.
So, like at Lauf Gravel Worlds, you have a lot of stops. I think you have 4 full aid stations, 3 water stations. You can make a lot of stops. You want to do your planning for what you're carrying in the best way to get the most distance for the least investment in what you're carrying. Let's call it weight. Like, but that's not quite true, but I think you'll get my point. So the least investment, what you're carrying to get the most distance. So you want to reduce the numbers. Every stop costs you time. So, I always get the question, should I wear a water pack or not? Well, if that water pack allows you to reduce at least one full stop out of your day, depending on the race and the length, it's likely worth it. Um, if you're racing at the pointy tip of the spear, if you're kind of just, I want to complete, or I have just a general time goal, you might tweak that. But if you're racing, that's your thinking. So reduce the stops, step one. Two, reduce the time at stops. Have a plan to do that. People don't do enough research on what are the stops like, what drinks are there, what foods are there. Like when I'm rolling into a stop, I know what I'm going to eat there. I know what I'm going to stick in my pocket. I'm usually carrying most of my nutrition anyway, but I usually take one extra piece when I leave a stop. So I have a very clear plan. Um, I'll give you a tip. I know at Lauf Gravel Worlds, they'll help. And I'm about to overwhelm them. Sorry, Jason. The aides will help you at the aid station. I want to roll into the stop first, and I'm asking them to fill my bottles for me. I want them to do something so I can focus on getting some additional fuel in me, drinking some additional on my own while somebody's filling my bottles or pack, and potentially even a restroom stop. So that I'm planning that. I have a time range. I want to be in and out in 5 minutes. Um, so that's my kind of dynamic, right? How I'm racing the other racers at the stop and pacing. I want to be in and out. What's my override? And here's something to think about. I leave in 5 minutes. If the group I rolled into, even if they're a good group, I leave in my 5 minutes. And I'll go back to my pacing strategy because you know what I want to happen? I want to pressure them to leave. So we all leave at 5 minutes. And I know they'll probably catch me 5 minutes up the road and I didn't gain time, but I might have gained time against the decision to just stall while I'm waiting for them to get done and not apply pressure for them to leave. So I know if I leave, there's at least 1 or 2 of them in that group that are going to get pressured to leave. Kai did it to me last year. It was the first time I had that trick reversed on me. She came in a little behind us with a small group, than my group, and she left in like 4 minutes. And I was like, oh crap, I need to get out. So it sped me up to like 4.5 minutes. So that's my override decision. Like I'm not going to just be a victim to the race. I'm going to dictate where I can dictate. But that didn't mean I left like I'm going to drop everybody and win the day. I went right back into my pacing strategy. If they caught me, which I was hoping, and
Mm-hmm.
they caught me. And if they didn't, they didn't. And what normally happens when you do that, and this is complicated, you actually increase your odds because you know what happens? Let's say you come in with a group of 9 other riders, so you're the 10, 6 catch you. So you
Mm-hmm.
still have enough to work, but you've gotten rid of a couple of contenders who ended up not getting out on time. They weren't handling their aid station well, and you've increased your odds of doing better in placing. So that's how I handle it. It's the same decision thinking. It's the same part of the pacing plan.
Yeah, and I think that last part about increasing the odds is such a good point because it doesn't put the pressure on one big decision that you're making in the race. It's like if you can increase the odds with 25 good decisions that day or better than bad decisions that day, that is going to increase your odds of, reaching your goal much better than, thinking about like one big decision, whether that's in the first hour of the race or if you're pacing so conservatively and thinking about like, oh, the last hour of the race is the most important. No, it's that series of, again and again. Um, well, I'm going to talk about fueling a little bit because I do.
Yeah, I was going to say because it's awesome. Thanks for going there.
Yeah, yeah, no. I mean, for a length of a race like this and the dynamic nature of it, it is one of the most important components. So I've already mentioned how important it is just from the cognitive and decision-making standpoint. But again, you know, racing dynamically, you're going to burn through your stores much more quickly than if you were going to just do a steady state effort. I mean, if you're going to do 150 miles and you don't care about anyone else and you have your complete steady endurance tempo pacing plan to get you from A to B, that's a little bit different. But what we're talking about here is very demanding on your physical energy stores as well as your decision making, that those two components are going to make or break your race. So the fueling strategy, it really does have to mimic and kind of follow in parallel your pacing profile or your effort. So um, something like if you're doing long climbs with long descents, you would think of pushing harder, let's say closer to threshold pace on the climb, but you're not necessarily doing much on the descent. So if you push your calorie intake while you're climbing, that gives you the ability to digest and recover on the descent, and you don't need to necessarily worry about taking in fuel there. In a gravel race, in a lot of these, you're kind of constantly fueling. So the
Mhm.
effort, like I said earlier, I mean, it's not like you're just recovering on the rollers and the downhills. You may or may not be in a group, and so needing to stay on top of your intake um, is important. You can't just have a plan to, carry a bunch of food and not take it in. If you're not consistently staying on top of your intake, that's going to set you back and it's going to increase the likelihood that you're going to make more bad decisions. So if we think of harder start, again, starting with full glycogen stores, that starts, let's say 2 to 3 days before the race. It Your breakfast on race morning does sort of impact that in a way that you just don't want to be starting in a hole at all, because if your strategy is, okay, I need to make these more aggressive decisions early on, those are costly in terms of glycogen, stored carbohydrate intake. So you want to start in the same way that you don't want to start dehydrated at all, especially in a hot race like this. You want to start on top. You want to start ahead. And then everything you're taking in during is just kind of keeping up with your effort. And so the more dynamic you're being, the more um, aggressive you're being, the more you have to kind of stay on top of that. It's just another thing too. So how how you do that, my suggestion is if you're going to be drinking anyway, so you've got your bottles, um, you've practiced drinking out of bottles on a gravel course with
Mhm.
people in the wind, you have your pack, whatever, add some carbs to that. So you have a baseline level that you're hitting, whether that's 20 grams of carbs in a bottle, whether it's 40 grams of carbs in a bottle, however you're mixing it, you're at least getting something. And then you fill in the rest of that with, I prefer gels. I'm not gonna like pick out chews and stuff to eat while I'm on a gravel course. The safest thing that is gonna get the carbs in for me makes the most sense. So I use gels and a combination of that with the drinks. So you might be able to get 60 to 80 grams of carbs an hour with just making sure you're drinking your fluids and then you've got your like one gel an hour or whatever. So you can't necessarily um go a long time without taking anything in, but if you're a few minutes behind on your gel, it's okay because you are at least still drinking your fluids that have some carbs. So I know everyone's got a different school of thought on like how they like to get their intake, but to me, for a gravel race like this, it makes the most sense. You need the hydration, you need the fuel. So combining some of it, not over concentrating it. Let's say you forget or you drop a bottle or you forget to refill something. You don't want to only rely on those bottles. So you have a distributed strategy here that increases again your odds of success, so you're not falling too far behind. Um, don't neglect the preload going into the race. So if we're thinking about like, oh, this is my pre-race breakfast, I've got my 90 grams of carbs an hour, but you haven't thought about how you're fueling heading into the race, that's what's going to impact your muscle glycogen stores. So if you didn't pay attention to your carb intake the day before, or you waited until just the dinner the night before, you're probably costing yourself some performance capability there, especially in the early part of the race. You definitely want to increase your carb intake starting, let's say, 2 to 3 days before the race. That's going to impact your muscle more so than your pre-race breakfast. Your pre-race breakfast is going to maybe impact your blood glucose and your liver glycogen, but your muscle glycogen is going to be set um, heading into the race in those days before. So, all right, go back to again, if your fueling strategy needs to parallel your effort profile. In the earlier part of the race, first 30 to 60 minutes, planning on it being higher intensity or more repeated surges to main contact, to make the strategic moves you want to make, having something right before you race. So you always see, racers on the start line having their gel. Maybe there's caffeine in it, that's a good idea. But then also, if you're thinking harder effort earlier, kind of front load your race a little bit. And this could be counterintuitive for some of you, but maybe if you want to average, let's say 80 grams of carbs an hour for the whole race, maybe you're starting with 90 to 100. It's a harder effort early. Maybe it's not as hot, so you can tolerate a little bit higher carb intake. This is something you do need to practice with the intensity. A lot of people sometimes when they're going that hard just can't eat. So again, that's why I
Yeah.
go to the drinks and the gels. Um, then that gives you the ability to maybe back off a little bit if it does get super hot and you have more challenges to your digestion and absorption at that point. So, um, a lot of this is pre-planning. So I like to have my base level covered. So you said you carry most of your nutrition, same, and I think that's smart. So have like, okay, this is the minimum I know I need to take in. It's going to be, partially in drinks, partially in gels, and then maybe I have a pocket of extra. So let's say I did go a little bit harder than I thought, but I felt good and I felt like I could manage and recover from it because I had these extra calories with me, I can support that effort so I can recover, and that's going to affect and impact your durability later. So have some extra calories there. You can also have some extra at the aid station. I love what you said about having a plan. This is what I know I need at the aid stations. I know I need to refill 2 bottles, and I'm going to grab like, you know, a pack of chews or a bar or whatever. So know what you need and then be open to grabbing something that you want. So maybe it's a handful of pretzels or a handful of chips or a Coke or whatever. So that's kind of another extra thing that you have on top of your baseline fueling strategy. Yeah, I know that's kind of a lot, but I think in terms of gravel racing, having in the similar way that you're thinking about your pacing plan, having your fueling plan set out, like this is what I need to do to be able to put out this sort of effort over, 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours. And then being flexible enough to know like, okay, I might need to add more than, um, and that'll cover me for if I am a little bit more aggressive early on and still allow me to recover and have energy later.
Mhm. Here's a great fueling pacing thing that I haven't said this in a long time, but I used to teach it like in some of our stuff. Um, let's say you're doing Lauf Gravel Worlds. Let's say you're doing the 75 and it's going to take you 5 hours, right? Let's just assume that everybody can follow this concept. Go get 5 sheets of paper. Go down to your dining room or kitchen table or your counter or wherever you want. Lay the 5 sheets out, right? Number them in the lower right hand corner 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then on each one of those, on the top left hand corner, set 1 or 2 bottles, whatever you think you're going to drink. They could be empty. You don't need water in them. So you can visualize it, right? And I guarantee you, everyone listening like me has a closet full of about 42 bottles, right? Of all different sizes and shapes. Just put them there and look at it. Then go into your ride fuel area. I have a whole shelf in my closet of chews and bars and things like that, and literally build out your strategy. Let's say your strategy was you're targeting 90 grams or 100 grams of carbs an hour. Lay them down. Each sheet is an hour. Lay it out. Oh, here's a thing of chews and 2 gels. Here's 2 chews and 1 gel. Whatever that is, that, and if you have 25 grams or 50 grams in a bottle, think all that through. Like, I'm drinking 1 bottle. I'm getting 35 grams from that, whatever your number might be. Lay all your food out and take a picture of it and hold that picture. And when you start thinking about your pre-planning strategy, this idea of pacing, that's your pacing. Add extra, always have more because things go wrong. Last year at Lauf Gravel Worlds, we had rain and mud, and that slowed us all down for about 25 minutes to get to the first aid station. I was super glad I had extra water. I almost didn't take extra water, and I would have suffered for it. But visualizing what Namrita just laid out is a powerful pacing tool. 1 hour, this is what I need. And that 1 hour might be a little higher. So maybe you got an extra piece of gel on that paper for 1 hour, or an extra gel, the 25 gram. Where are you taking in caffeine? Is it every hour? Is it every other hour? Like, think it out on paper, like plan it. That makes your decision making easier. It'll make a decision easier. What if you're thinking I'm at an aid station in 3 hours? I am going to stop there and pick up 50 grams of food and shove it in my pie hole. Great. Put that on your piece of paper, like think it out. If you pre-plan like that, now you have a target. You're visually looking at your target. Your brain associates the target better. Then on your final piece of paper, put your eating rule. Eat every 15 minutes, right? That's your plan. Now you're
Yeah,
making less decisions.
along with what you said, let's say for the first 3 hours, I have some pockets that are easier for me to access.
Great point.
So I'll always have my stuff. And if I know I'm waiting for caffeine, I'll have my caffeine in my later pocket. So once I get to the first aid station, I'll empty out my easy pockets. I'll move everything over for the next 3 hours. So I know when those pockets are empty, I've stayed on top of my fueling plan. So I'm not having the last thing I want to do is math while I'm racing. Especially in the heat. And so, like, taking out those decision points, making it all easy for you. So it's literally like, these are the pockets I need to go to once they're empty. I know once my bottles are empty, I know I've taken in what I need, and I can trust that I've got the energy on board then, and that can impact how well I can make decisions going forward. But another thing you said, and this is so true about gravel racing and the difference when things go wrong. I mean, if you have a flat or if you have a mud section and you have to walk, you could add significant time to your race. And if you're not thinking about having additional fluids or calories there, or just simply taking in what you have, yeah, you're not riding, you might be walking, but that's still an energy cost. And it still could be 30 to 60 minutes of time walking that if you're not taking anything in, then that's already setting you behind. So again, the challenges of gravel, absolutely
Mhm.
impact things like fueling, equipment,
Yeah.
pacing,
When
all
I
that.
lay mine out on paper like that, I put a bonus hour. Like that's what I count on. I don't want to carry more than that, but I do want to be prepared for up
Exactly.
for an hour. For me, as a final tip for all of us that are going to be riding out at Off Gravel Worlds with us, that's how I pack.
Hmm.
Like I generally know it, I've done it enough, but I do lay it out exactly like that. Then I put all that in my food bag and make sure it goes with me. I don't want to have to rely on finding food at an event or something else. That's how I pack. That's how I determine how much drink mix I'm bringing. It's how I think it through. So it's not only an exercise in pre planning, it's an exercise in um, being prepared. Like,
Hmm.
you know, and then also, like, I know what I have there. That often tells me, for me, it often tells me what I'm going to end up wanting to find and eat at the aid stations. I need savory. I get sweet, sick of sweets very quickly. I'm not like a sweet person. I don't like a lot of candies and stuff like that. It's just not my thing. So it really is like taking medicine for me to do all those gels and cubes. And as soon as I
Except
hit
for
the
that
aid
one
station,
day I saw you with a big bowl of gummies as your
oh
ride.
no, no, don't get me wrong. I didn't say totally adverse.
Okay.
And I have been known to have a bag full of Swedish fish or gummies or whatever is ride fuel. I'm okay with that. But I know when I get to aid station, I'm going right for potato chips, pretzels. I need to break that because that actually helps prolong the amount of time that I can more easily eat gels and things like that before I'm just like, if I take one more gel, I'm going to yak. Um, so that savory really extends that. So by looking at what you have on your list, it actually helps you think of, and I know I'm going to be craving pretzels. Do they have that? Oh, they have pretzels. I'm going to find them, eat. And pretzels are tough to eat because they don't go down very fast, but I think you get my point.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, let's finish talking about and the plan versus, being flexible with your plan. So, you know, a plan is not a firm contract. It's something that you should know can be edited. So similar to a fueling plan, and hydration too, like you have a plan, but then you have to go with the flow. You have to go with, okay, is the effort um what I was planning on? Is it hotter? or not as hot as I was planning on, whatever. Like there's some level we have to trust our feelings too. And I think that's what makes the most successful racers is you have this plan, obviously you've trained and everything and practiced your fueling, but you trust your body too. So we're thinking RPE, we're thinking stomach, how's your stomach tolerating the efforts? And we're thinking about how well can we make these negotiations with ourselves or avoid the negotiations, and how many times can we make a good decision to increase the odds of us performing well? Um, so there's, I think, two different ways you can make these plan edits. Why don't you explain how you do it, maybe in terms of like, okay, here's my plan, here's my guardrails. If I'm feeling better or worse than expected, how do I make those adjustments?
Well, there's two. My brain, like for me, planning decision making process within an event is always a decision tree because we want to simplify. Your brain wants to simplify that decision. The more you can do that, the better you are. So you have two edits. You make a positive edit and a negative edit. I can do more, I can do less, right? Here's
Mhm.
the problem with both the positive and the negative effort. And this is why it gets risky. And this is what starts all the brain self talking and doubt. Because when you're talking in your head, you're talking to future you. Like you're
Mhm.
always thinking consequences. The brain, the voice going on in your head is consequence based in general. So you need to be cognitive of that. But that decision, you won't know if you made a good decision for at least 10 minutes. Like absorb that for a second, right? As I go through it, because it's true. And this is what makes these decision making hard. You're not going to ever avoid the reality of just what I said. You can improve the odds, but you're not going to avoid it. So if you make a positive edit, man, I am feeling good. I'm on my pacing plan. I've been ticking it out well for an hour. I really do think I can do more and still finish strong. That's a positive edit. You may make that decision. My plan has been too conservative. I'm more fit than I think. I've come in well stocked up. I'm high on carbohydrates. I'm ready to go. You make a positive decision. Do I move forward? You won't know if that's a good decision until about 10 to 15 minutes into that when you start getting a little of the, wow, this was right. I am still feeling good. Or you start getting, uh-oh, this was a little more, this is a little, maybe I wasn't as ready, right? So you
Mhm.
have to make a good decision based on the feeling you are now. When you're making that decision, let go of the 10 minutes. Like you're going to make the best, stay in the moment, make the decision based on and try to really feel and listen to your body. Same with the negative edit. But the negative edit is a reverse 10 minutes most of the time. You actually have 10 minutes before and 10 minutes after of the negative effort, which makes them harder. And what do I mean 10 minutes before? If you're really starting to question, should I slow down my pacing effort because this is too hard? So you're probably 10 minutes too late already. Like that 10 minutes is on the backside. Like, so you have to deal with that. The hardest part about making the negative edit is one, we're wired not to do it. It's a defeat, and we don't want to admit defeat. Um, and it has a big consequence in the voice going on in your head on future you. Well, if I slow down, I'm going to be 50 places less, or I'm not going to do well, and it's all going to be bad because we want the worst consequences. Our brain spins there, which isn't necessarily true. Sometimes slowing down for 20 minutes allows you to finish stronger than you ever thought. But you have that negative 10 minutes. And then once you slow down, now you have another 10 minutes to be like, oh, this was too slow. I've now
Mhm.
recovered. I can step back into the pacing. So
Mhm.
understand that one, and this is freeing, you're going to make a positive or negative decision. Those things are going to happen to your plan all the time. Two, you won't be as much able to predict the outcome as you think you are. Just listen to your body, make a fast and good decision, live with the 10-minute consequences, evaluate it 10 minutes before, into the decision. You can't do it for before, when you're making the negative one, and live with the results. Because what really kills you is when we have decision pre and post anxiety. I think about the decision for 25 minutes, which increases my anxiety, therefore my RPE and my stress. And then I worry about it for hours later, which increases my anxiety. Make the damn decision, live with it. Done. Like, I know that's an oversimplification and it's never that easy, competitively wise, but that is your mindset. make it, own it, live with it, feel it out for 10 minutes, redecide if you need to. That's your story.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, like in these long races, it's not over until it's over. So when you cross the finish line, you're done making your decisions and whatever happened out there happened. But like, if you make a decision and 10 minutes later you're like, okay, time to make another decision, like you said, it's freeing. You might have 5 more hours of decisions to make. It doesn't, that one you made right then, maybe it wasn't the best one, doesn't have to decide everything that happens going forward. So I think that's such a healthy way to think about this that can reduce anxiety. Um, I would say like also knowing you need to do that and knowing that it's a good thing to be actively doing during the race. It's not a failure on your part to stick to the plan. It's part of the plan, training this internal check-in. So what are the things that you're thinking about when you're making these decisions? For me, it's my body position on the bike. I mean, that's something that, in a long gravel race, I kind of struggle with if fatigue is setting in. So like rechecking that, like are you relaxed? Are you actually like breathing? Um, have you been taking in your fluids? Have you been eating? Oh, maybe you skipped the gel. Like it's time. That's an easy enough fix. So things like that. Are you pedaling too much low cadence or are you pedaling too much high cadence? So all of those things go into those, we think of them as processes and process goals that lead to the outcome, but they should all be part of your internal check-in. I don't know if you have any other ones.
No, I think that's, I mean, the most important thing here is you, the listener, should have yours.
Yeah.
Like, I know there's certain decisions like I don't want to, like, your overarching goal by doing everything we just talked about, and particularly what Namrita is saying now, is you reduce the number of decisions and the complexity of decisions mid performance. So many people get lost in broad ranging decision, and your mind just wants to go and go and go on this. And that is not so. I'm sitting here very still in my chair and I'm talking. So, guess what's burning, a lot of energy in my body? My brain. Like your brain takes calories, everybody. It doesn't work without fuel. It's, as a matter of fact, it's sort of attached to your liver and pulling out a very specific energy resource. The more you're thinking, the more you're burning energy, and the more you're upregulating your anxiety because you're making decision after decision, the more energy you're burning. It's just how you work. So don't do that. So I know, like, decision making points. I know when I'm going to. I have check-in points for my pacing, like, and that might be different and it's different for every race. At 10, I'll give you an example. So if I'm targeting 10 hours or better at Lauf Gravel Worlds 150, I'm checking in every hour. And you might be like, well, Tim, that might be bad. You might get it wrong a half an hour in. Yeah, but if I'm making too many decisions, I'm more likely over the course of the 10 hours to make bad decisions. I'm okay living with my 1 hour kind of thinking, and that's okay. And I don't want to reevaluate. I have a general concept of what I'm going to target in that first hour, second hour. I know I'll have an aid station in the third hour, like those kind of things. I don't want to rethink. I'm going to commit to that because I'm not going that hard. I'm obviously pacing at a slower rate and I have reasonable discipline for pacing. I don't need to check in. And even if I feel good 30 minutes in, I'm going to stick with what I'm doing because I have 10 hours of good decision making. Now, if that was a 2.5 hour, 3 hour, I might be checking in every 20 minutes. So I'm adjusting it to, I want to make the least amount of decisions that are, positively impacting the race without overthinking anything based on the race duration.
Mm.
That's my answer.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot of good stuff. For anyone listening, if you're going to be at Laugh Gravel Worlds, we actually have a coach panel that you can attend if you
Oh
have
yeah.
more follow-up questions or you made your plan and you want to run it by us. We'll be there. Let's say it's Thursday at the expo at the Laugh tent at 4 o'clock. So obviously, all of this is so valuable and helpful for any type of racing and any type of gravel racing. But, we will be at Laugh Gravel Worlds if you want to come ask some more coaching questions. So thanks everyone for listening. For more coaching content and information on all our coaching programs, including our expert guided one-on-one coaching, visit us at joinbasecamp.com. Our mission is to empower and educate you, the athlete, and to provide a training and learning community for the seasoned racer and newer rider alike. Finally, if you like this content, we really appreciate you leaving us a review and rating for the podcast wherever you listen. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Hopefully, see you at Laugh Gravel World.
Mhm. Bye.